Harris with the NSA.
We have identified some very, very interesting anomalous type of aircraft.
Traffic is quite luminous and is exhibiting some non-ballistic motion. Over.
Move very rapidly at any speed or whether any direction it wanted to go. Why it could change and go to the right or the left or go crossways without hesitating a bit.
What do you think it was?
Well, if they call it a flying saucer, that's what it is.
EWA 517, do you want to report a UFO? Over. Negative. We don't want to report.
Look, it wasn't my worst Wednesday night.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another live edition of Anomaly-NOW, straight out of Austin, Texas. I'm Miles Lewis, and there is...
Hey, Mark Jackson. Hello, everybody. Good evening.
Man.
Hey, Miles.
Good to see you. It's been too long.
Good to see you, too.
Well, this is the weekly live news media roundup for the 501c3 nonprofit Anomaly Archives Scientific Anomaly Institute here in Austin, Texas. You can follow that link that you see on your screen, anomalyarchives.org. And that will lead you, of course, to the Flipboard that we will be referring to, where we post all the news links that we talk about here on the show. And so that is anomalyarchives.org. Oh, I got to get a new newsletter out. It's been far too long. This is the April 12th, 2023 episode, and I'm glad to be here with my friend Mark and fellow board member.
Smiles.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Woo. Okay. So this week there is a number of articles that we link to over at the Flipboard, which you can see here. That's flipboard.com/@anomalyarchives.org, and then some other long gibberish URL stuff that, again, is easier to just click on the link over at anomalyarchives.org. But as usual, there is a ton of fun stuff here. Stuff that we're probably not going to get to, but this repeating radio signal leads astronomers to an Earth-sized exoplanet. That's always interesting
article. Yeah, it was great. Great.
And my good friend Miguel Romero, aka Red Pill Junkie. Look out, the FBI is listening. He mentioned the red pill. He's got an article over at his absurdbydesign.com blog where he's talking about our UFO occupants, time travelers. And he talks about some vintage television and theatrical programs dealing with the idea that the UFOnauts might in fact be time travelers. And this is one of those many ideas out there that I find very interesting, and not one that I lean towards, but it entertains me. And sometimes that's as important to my sensibility as whether it holds up to scrutiny or rational scientific rigorousness. Well, speaking of whether things stack up to rigorous scientific investigation, one of these articles I posted a week or so ago is this Guardian.com or theguardian.com. Bees are sentient inside the stunning brains of nature's hardest workers. Now, this is one of those ideas that really appeals to me because of my own personal interest in, again, the romantic idea of a Gaian UFO hypothesis, the idea that there is a planetary consciousness and that is somehow connected to the UFO. Well, then what does that have to do with sentient bees? Well, it has to do with my ideas and those of others that the UFO phenomena may in fact be a transpersonal virtual reality communications mechanism. That is to say that there are circumstances and areas on the planet perhaps that seem to allow consciousness, particularly ours, since that's what we're talking about, our conscious experiences of these strange anomalous lights, strange entities, and perceived intelligent beings. And what I've come away with from all my interest in the UFO subject and parapsychological data is this idea that there is a mechanism in place that allows for humans to experience the consciousnesses of other species, and that those species could be extraterrestrial using the same mechanism. They could be interdimensional using the same mechanism, but that they also might represent other species already on this planet. Why exhaust, or why jump to extraterrestrial when we haven't, I think, exhausted all the possibilities inherent here on the planet? But this article obviously has a larger implication beyond well, it has implications beyond that, because it's, of course, the bees are what enable our food supply to be what it is and to feed people. And this article talks about a number of researchers. This gentleman, Stephen Buckman, from Tucson, Arizona, and some other researchers who are chiming in, saying that they too have, in their decades of research, gotten a sense that there is an intelligence at play, not just a hive-minded intelligence, as in the collective of the insect intelligence, like an ant mound or a beehive, but that the individual bees exhibit emotions, possible traumatic stress disorder, and
that was interesting.
I mean, a lot to consider here, and I have not delved into the deep science, if there is any really good science here, other than just observation and possible anthropomorphizing of one of these researchers' ideas. But it certainly would have wide-ranging implications if we suddenly accepted the possibility of sentient insects. There's,
I think they need to develop different. I think they're what I took away from the article, Smiles, is that they need better instruments, more custom instruments, if they're going to focus on bees. And I think they mentioned that a couple of times in the article. So they're trying to figure out how to get the metrics and instruments that can, develop the metrics to take this out of fringe and put this more into mainstream. The whole notion of this. The other thing I learned in the article, and it's a quick read. I suggest people go through it. One, just the importance of bees, but two, that the U.S. government considers them livestock because of their importance to food production. So again, just a quick read, but man, there's so much to learn and unpack in one small article. It's great. Yeah, and the idea of developing ethical research standards for them. Of course, these researchers, this other Buckman and Chitka, both have expressed in this article that ever since they've come to this conclusion, they have modified their own ethical approach to how to do experimentation on these creatures. And it fascinates me, again, going back to my own personal idea about UFOs being connected to a Gaian mind, or being a mechanism for in interacting with other species. I often point out that so much of the UFO literature, including just like the channeling literature, with or without actual UFO or anomalous object or light sightings, there's such a over and over again capitulation of this hive-mindedness, this hierarchy of levels of consciousness, whether it's in the Ashtar command, these different channeled realities, or the different levels of some of the insect-like, automaton-like entities that have been described, the short grays to the taller grays, to the actual people describing mantis-like and aliens. And at some point, it started occurring to me, well, if as I believe, the nature of the UFO phenomenon mechanism is some kind of interface with our collective unconscious and our own unconscious, that we are experiencing things through those lenses, through those onion layers of consciousness, that it seems probable that just as parapsychological evidence suggests that there's anomalous cognition, anomalous information transfer, aka telepathy, ESP, etc., remote viewing, clairvoyance, all those things. Why wouldn't that apply
to other species that are already here with us. And again, some of the classic tropes of the contactee literature and on into the abduction literature are these ideas that these aliens, whatever they are trying to convince us that we're destroying the planet, whether it be through atomic weapons or chemicals or insecticide. So what if if these other species are intelligent, or even if they aren't sentient in the sense that this article is implying, what if they have their own collective consciousness? And could that somehow be overt, like deliberately, or just as an act of self-preservation at an unconscious level, somehow engaging with us through this weird mechanism that is the UFO phenomena? It's a far out idea, and I am not saying that it's holds up to scientific scrutiny. I don't know how the hell one would try to even investigate or let alone prove that, but it's an idea that I come back to over and over again. And I'm not alone. It was, it was encouraging when I saw people like Jacques Vallée and Jenny Randles and others say, when listing off a litany of possible sources of the UFO intelligence, they each said, oh, and also a Gaian mind, some kind of planetary consciousness.
Yeah. Well, I think that we've established, well, it depends on where you're at on the subject, but the notion of, like you say, remote view, the mechanism that you speak of has been validated scientifically from a number of different directions, whether it's spooky action at a distance, from the classic physics model, to the staring phenomena I think we mentioned in one of the previous shows. So yeah, I think there's validation from another of the mechanism, like you say, and that's headed in the right direction.
So keeping with animals, let's check out this real brief article over at earth.com. 2 new species of poisonous birds discovered. I don't know that I'd ever heard of any poisonous birds. And apparently these 2 new species, but I don't think they weren't newly discovered. It was only discovered or realized that they are poisonous. And apparently it's the same toxin that the famous frogs that are used for hunting by the natives. These birds are in New Guinea, and the discoverers, Nud Johnson of the Natural History Museum of Denmark, and Kasun Badawada from the University of Copenhagen made this discovery. And while it is, they say, a deadly toxin, it isn't deadly to humans, at least not in small quantities. It's more of an irritant, and they go into descriptions about. At first, they thought one of their members, these guys was sad, but it was just that he was having tears in his eyes and a runny nose. And as they like the experience to like holding the birds is unpleasant, and almost like that experience of when you cut onions and are forced to cry, except that it's due to this chemical process. And it's presumed that because the birds aren't producing the toxin, it's something they're acquiring from their environment, probably some similarly poisonous beetles that are available as part of their diet in the nearby area, and which they have apparently found in their stomachs. So, but yeah, it mentions the iconic poison dart frogs of South and Central America, particularly the golden poison frog, are well known for their lethal toxins. Recently, scientists discovered 2 new poisonous bird species in New Guinea that carry the same type of toxin in their skin and feathers, revealing that this potent neurotoxin is more widespread than previously thought. It's called batrachotoxin.
So Smiles, did they mention, is this you say it's accumulated through their environment? They've grown obviously immune to it, and is it used for self-defense, or is it used to to subdue other sources of food or something?
They aren't sure, but they asked that same question of how are they able to not be affected by it, and what would be the benefit, and it seems to be a deterrent. That if something like if one of them were eaten the results would be unpleasant enough that the creatures would avoid them. And it may be more toxic for smaller creatures. I'm not sure, but how can these birds carry toxins in their body without suffering harm themselves? The research team, inspired by the poison dart frog's genetic mutations that prevent toxins from affecting their sodium channels, explored this question. They actually gave a little bit of a description of how the toxin actually works. Not sure if I can find that real quick, but these are called the Regent Whistler and the Rufous-naped bellbird, not their scientific names. I won't try to pronounce those, but that's pretty cool. Meanwhile, over here in Texas,
back home,
strange animal caught on camera in South Texas park sparks debate. Looks kind of like a chubby otter, maybe, but I think you and I both. Even I, as not a very well experienced hunter or animal identifier, was like, that's probably a badger.
Yeah,
and
kind of thinking badger.
Yeah, and let's see.
But the Parks and Rec, they got some press from this, and good on them for taking something they're not sure of and spinning it and getting us to talk about it, and other folks will take a quick read.
Yep. I think the Texas Parks and Wildlife are celebrating their 100th year of state parks. And there are so many great ones all across the state. Of course, there's in this article, the obligatory, clearly a chupacabra, Jeremy Halderman added. Some were not as entertained by the speculation. Quote, I mean, that's quite clearly an American badger, Kristen Green said. I appreciate the post made as it is in order to get people engaged, but surely the parks folk are not scratching their head about this one. Well, yeah. But yes, I totally agree with your sentiment. It's like, hey, if people start talking about what is that, then that's a perfect opportunity to educate and inform and help get some attention to our parks. I think that's a good thing. Meanwhile, over on the internet, I want to play a really quick clip here and
pointed that for the second year in a row, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or ARROW, was not fully funded in the department's budget request. Understanding that we cannot get into specific budget figures in this forum, can you discuss why ARROW was not fully funded?
Senator, I don't have any information from my colleague, Undersecretary Moultrie, that he needed additional funding in this area. It's a relatively new office we're standing up, so I was under the impression that we have adequate funding for the relatively new state of this. But I'll double back with him if there's a concern. I
need you to send a letter to this committee in writing about why it wasn't fully funded. Several senators signed a letter to Secretary Hicks asking that it be fully funded in this budget, and we specified in a classified annex exactly what funding wasn't being met. And it's operational funding, it's basic operational funding. So I'm highly concerned about this.
Sasquatch spaceship. So that clip is brought to you by this other podcast. It's Witness Citizen is the name of the podcast, but this particular episode is their Sasquatch spaceship episode, and their weekly UAP news roundup. These folks, the hosts there, are particularly active and engaged in the UFO activism realm. And in fact, the host, who was not present for that particular episode, it's because he was doing this event. The folks might have heard of an inquiry into anomalous experiences and the phenomenon 2023. This is a repeating event put on by two of the hosts, and I'm going to get their names wrong. So I'm not even Mr. King and I forget the other fellow, but this one just happened last weekend, Saturday, April 8th, and featured among the long list of participant Derek Pitts, Ryan Graves, James Fox, Elizabeth Crone, Peter Levenda, Daniel Ingram, Brandon Fugel, the current latest alleged owner of Skinwalker, Kurt Jamungal, and Leslie Kane. And, these are the guys that are the hosts. I'm sorry.
Wow,
Jay
that's
Christopher King.
a big
and Jim
lineup, Smiles. I mean, those are some names that are in there.
I will say,
recognizable names. Yeah.
Mr. King and Mr. Landoli have been having some real heavy hitters with these events. And while each of the speakers is very interesting, and I might have pros and cons to say about them. Actually, I saw Elizabeth Crone last year at the grand opening of the Anomaly Archive. No, excuse me. The grand opening of the Archives of the Impossible at Rice University, which the second event, the annual follow-up event, is coming up, starting with remote lectures next week, in fact. But yeah, these are some great heavy hitters. This Derek Pitts, he's also been a NASA Solar System ambassador. Of course, Ryan Graves is the guy who's been he's one of the military guys who we mentioned in the previous episode, has been instrumental in getting the UAP subcommittee added to the Americans for Safe Aerospace, or rather, he's a founder of that, but there's that other aerospace safety international organization that we mentioned that he got the committee going for. Peter Levin is infamous, of course, for having allegedly written the Necronomicon, and having also partnered, of course, with To the Stars Academy, Tom DeLonge, and the writing of several books published by his outlet, and others here like Leslie Kane. So interesting stuff. The SCU, the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, they, of course, have had their conferences going on recently. And I remember hearing a little birdie told me about who was attending one of these recent SCU events, that there was a certain Larry Hancock there who everybody was talking about because he's got the proof of the atomic energy connection to the UFO phenomena. And I was like, that rings a bell. What am I remembering? And then sure enough, from a couple of years ago, I had read, I heard some interviews with this Larry Hancock, who had just published at that point, this is, I guess, back in 2017, probably, this book, Unidentified: The National Intelligence Problem of UFOs. Of course, this was right before, everything opened up in December 2017. And I remember I was listening to a recording of this podcast interview with him while driving in West Texas, and it was really interesting. But it came down to he's considered an intelligence analyst. I think we've got his website over here. Yeah, Larry-Hancock.com. And he's written mostly in the world of military and intelligence topics, but there too is his UFO foray, Unidentified. And sure enough, why am I bringing him up? Well, this SCU paper that was posted 6 days ago, SCU publishes UAP pattern recognition study of the U.S. military atomic warfare complex. Ooh, that sounds scary. Here is and of course it's not going to do it. It's a 63-page PDF that you can download. We'll post a link there. A lot of charts and graphs. So you said you had a chance to look at it. I was just noticing that. So they were analyzing nuclear material and weapons related facilities and alleged UAP sightings near them from the period, I think 1945, 1977 or 75. I guess I should read the abstract.
Yeah,
maybe.
42 to 75. Yeah, it's temporal too, through the development of the atomic program. So it has to do with the incidents, sightings, the incidents, reportable incidents, including stuff out of Blue Book, from the production of atomic material to the construction of weapons to the storage of the material and then the deployment facilities. And so that would be the complex that they're speaking of. And so what they do is they take a look at sightings based on control groups to known facilities where the different stages of this complex had occurred temporally and then also geospatially, of course, as you can see here. This is a fascinating article, and true to the SCU's mission statement, this is data driven. They don't talk about agency, what's behind it or anything. They're just taking raw data. The article may seem long, but it's a lot of charts. A lot of the pages are filled with intuitive information that they really laid it out there, and they want to make it consumable. And that's another mission of the SCU, is to bring data and some of this harder concepts, to more of the lay person. What I found great about this article is, I don't know if you can go to it, Miles, but there's a really strong local connection with the Killeen base.
Yep, that's exactly
yeah, 1948 to 1949. This was a weapons storage facility, and this came right after, the peak in between 1948 and 1949 of reported unknown sightings occurred, just after, a number of months after the completion of the Killeen weapons storage facility. And what's interesting about that is the number of reported unknown cases, because in most of these charts, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4 sightings, per these, these windows, these anomalous windows, where they can say, hey, this is not normal to background. But this is 25 cases. So not only is it the number that's this Killeen base versus its control groups is so interesting from the study, but it's also how close it was to the completion. So you'll see in some of the other groupings or the windows and charts, et cetera, the time between the activity at a particular facility and when the uptick or the window of the UAP activity occurs is a lot more spaced out. But this Killeen one, man, it's very interesting. It's very interesting stuff.
Yeah, and there are so many instances. I mean, Texas is a big state, so of course, even if just you go on like averages by square miles, there's going to be more military bases likely, but they just recur so much through this, both in terms of the control groups as well as the sites that they're trying to test this hypothesis. So again, among the controls for the Sandia base and Kirtland Air Force Base, they have El Paso, Texas as a population center, under Pantex plant study site in Amarillo, Texas as a site of focus. They've got Pampa and Dumas population centers in Lubbock, Texas. But yeah, it occurs again, Killeen base study site, Great Army Airfield, Killeen, Texas. And as I was just seeing in this Medina base, Kelly Air Force Base. And yeah, so their conclusion basically is that there was a higher anomalous number of UFO sightings centered on these atomic development sites. And it also says that they, particularly early in their development of the sites, before they were even operational. And as you say, they don't try to go into agency, though they do speculate at least a little about the perception that this is some sort of surveillance.
Coupled to my own research on this, what I found interesting, Minot, North Dakota, where I grew up, which kind of sparked my interest in this research initially many years ago, there's a quality to the reporting as well that they mentioned briefly in this report. And so it ranges from far off distant lights to lights that move in anomalous ways that don't match the technology of the time, to actually seeing craft. And I know, again, through my own research, that the actual visual confirmation that they saw craft hovering in the air versus far off distant lights was actually over the ICBM, the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile sites in Minot, North Dakota, where it was actually the MPs that were in charge of guarding the sites. Essentially, they're in 24-hour watch, of course, were the ones that reported many of those incidences that were recorded for the Minot, North Dakota cases in this report. So those were very up close and personal accounts. And again, there's a quality across of these sightings across all these reports as well. That's interesting. You can glean from it. The other big takeaway from this, if anybody's interested in just the development of our atomic program in general, you can read this report and take a lot away by way of just history as to where we started, how it moved around. I mean, there's just a lot about the history of atomic development in this report too that you'll be able to take away out of it. That's completely separate from the UAP phenomena. So that was something else that jumped out at me. That's a really good. If you're going to take the time, that's something else you can get out of it.
Yeah, and I will say, the SCU, they're doing a great job of coming up with these less than controversial digestions of the data and being very proactive in delivering that to people in the United States government and military and intelligence folks. They're helping put that information in their hands, and they're cultivating those relationships, and I think that's a really good thing. Well, we are at the half-hour mark, and that was more or less the main topics that I was hoping to get through for this weekly short news roundup. So, but want to thank everybody for joining us. Mark, especially great to see you again.
Yeah, Smiles, good to see you too. I'm glad we're reconnecting here. The show's stronger than ever, hopefully. Let's see what the rest of 2023, quarters 2, 3, and 4 have in store for us.
Indeed. And there's some countdowns to greater things happening in the background. So
yes,
well, thank you, everybody. This has been Anomaly Now via the Anomaly Archives in Austin, Texas. Thank you for joining us. Good night.
Thanks, everybody. Good night, Smiles.
Behold the Anomaly Archives poster. Gaze upon its magnificence. But please keep it down, for there is Shashi the alien. Do not be alarmed. But who is that mysterious MIB digging deep into the files? Steady your gaze. Patty the cryptid is elusive, and to catch even a faint glimpse is quite an achievement. Thrill at the horror of a living challenged apparition who has stopped by to study a forgotten tome. Elsewhere, scattered about, the keen eye will observe artifacts of sacred and forgotten lore. After a long gaze one may grow envious and wish to possess a physical manifestation of this grand visage. What once seemed like an insurmountable expedition is now made into an effortless side quest. For now, at the Archives shop, one can find this thrilling representation available for acquisition, where, among the usual wares, denizens of this fair land will find this and other scrolls, exquisite apparel, hot beverage drinking vessels, and a plethora of other treasures. Enough to satisfy the desires of any who seek the most elusive emotion of all, fulfillment.